Richmond, British Columbia, 1989. A jogger stops dead in his tracks, eyes fixed on something behind an abandoned house. It was a woman's body, partially concealed by overgrown bushes. Her hands and feet bound behind her back with twine. A black nylon stocking wrapped 6 times around her neck. Needle marks visible on her arm. The wind rustles through trees as police photographers document the scene. A detective kneels to examine the bindings on her wrists. "That's impossible," he mutters. Despite the tight bindings, there are no marks on her skin. No bruises. No struggle. For 7 years, this woman, 44-year-old Cindy James, had reported over 100 attacks. Threatening phone calls that came in the dead of night. Vandalism that escalated to physical assaults. She had been found unconscious multiple times, once with a knife driven through her hand. Police had spent thousands of hours investigating. They installed surveillance equipment in her home. They set up special phone lines to trace calls. They mounted round-the-clock protection operations. But not once, not a single time, did anyone else witness her attacker. At her autopsy, toxicology reports revealed a lethal combination of morphine and Demerol in her system. Enough to kill her several times over. The question wasn't just who killed Cindy James. The question that still haunts this case today: did anyone kill her at all? Before she became the center of one of Canada's most baffling mysteries, Cindy Hack lived a life marked by quiet obedience. Born in 1944, she was raised in a traditional German-Canadian family in Oliver, British Columbia. Her father, Otto Hack, worked at a local sawmill, a strict, uncompromising man whose approval Cindy desperately sought but rarely received. Her mother, Tilly, embodied traditional values and deferred to her husband in all matters. Childhood friends described Cindy as painfully shy, desperate to please, and terrified of confrontation. When other children would stand up to playground bullies, Cindy would freeze, her eyes wide with fear. Even as a little girl, Cindy seemed afraid of her own shadow, recalled her childhood friend Martha Kendall. She'd apologize even when someone bumped into her. This pattern of appeasing others would follow her into adulthood. At 24, working as a pediatric nurse at Richmond General Hospital, Cindy met Dr. Roy Makepeace, a psychiatrist 17 years her senior. Their courtship raised eyebrows among hospital staff. The power dynamic was impossible to ignore: the authoritative doctor and the deferential nurse. Colleagues noted how Cindy's demeanor changed in his presence, her voice softening, her opinions vanishing. She became whatever she thought he wanted her to be, remembered Susan Farrell, a fellow nurse. One day she told me she'd always hated seafood. The next week, after Roy mentioned loving salmon, suddenly it was her favorite food too. Their 1967 marriage cemented what many saw as an uneven partnership. Roy made the decisions: where they lived, how they spent money, who they socialized with. Cindy kept the house immaculate, entertained his colleagues, and accompanied him to medical conferences where she rarely spoke. The couple never had children, though Cindy had desperately wanted them. According to her sister Melanie, Roy had decided children would complicate their lifestyle. Cindy never challenged this decision openly. Cindy's parents never warmed to Roy. Her father, Otto, thought the doctor put on airs and didn't appreciate how he corrected Cindy in public. "That man treats my daughter like she's one of his patients, not his wife," Otto once confided to a family friend. Tilly, Cindy's mother, worried that her daughter was fading away in the marriage. During family visits, she noticed Cindy checking Roy's expressions before answering even simple questions like what she wanted for dinner. Cindy's sister Melanie was more direct in her assessment: Roy didn't want a partner. He wanted an audience. And Cindy played that role perfectly for 16 years. For his part, Roy maintained cordial relationships with Cindy's family, attributing their coldness to class differences and educational gaps in private conversations with colleagues. In late 1981, at 44 years old, Cindy did something that shocked everyone who knew her. She filed for divorce. "It was like watching a doormat suddenly stand up," Melanie recalled. None of us saw it coming, least of all Roy. Roy didn't contest the divorce, which was finalized in January 1982. He quickly moved on, dating a pharmaceutical representative within months. The split was surprisingly amicable on paper. Roy even helped Cindy secure a mortgage for a modest house on Aragon Road in Richmond. For the first time in her adult life, Cindy lived alone. Friends noticed a tentative blooming. She redecorated in bright colors Roy had always vetoed, adopted a cat, and enrolled in art classes. I remember her showing me curtains she'd bought, yellow with little flowers, said Agnes Woodcock, who would become Cindy's closest friend. She kept touching them saying, "No one had to approve these but me." It seems small, but for Cindy, it was revolutionary. She kept her married name James, but otherwise seemed eager for a fresh start. Her new house became a symbol of her independence. But that independence would be short-lived. February 25, 1982, barely 4 months after her divorce. A cold, rainy night. Cindy was alone in her new home when the phone rang just after 11 p.m. "I haven't forgotten you, bitch," a male voice whispered before hanging up. Cindy's hands shook so badly she could barely dial her ex-husband's number. Roy suggested she was overreacting to a wrong number and should change her phone line. She did. The calls continued, now to her unlisted number. March 3, 1982, a note appeared on her windshield. "I'm watching you." March 14, her porch light shattered. Glass scattered across her welcome mat. March 23, another call. "You can change your number, but you can't hide from me." Each incident sent her spiraling. She installed new locks. Then a security system. She began sleeping with the lights on, the phantom sounds of footsteps jolting her awake throughout the night. By April 1982, the harassment had escalated to slashed tires and broken windows. Cindy's father finally convinced her to file a police report. Richmond Royal Canadian Mounted Police Constable Tom McBride took her initial statement. His case notes described Cindy as visibly trembling, eyes constantly darting to windows and doors, classic signs of severe anxiety or paranoia. McBride assigned a junior officer to drive by her house during night shifts. He advised her to keep a log of all incidents. He checked records for similar patterns in the area and found nothing comparable. "We took her claims seriously," McBride later testified. While we couldn't confirm her story, her fear was undeniably real. The log Cindy began to keep would eventually fill 3 thick binders. May 31, 1982, cat food strewn across her front steps. June 4, garden hose cut into precise 1-inch pieces. June 16, the word "die" painted on her garage door. Each time police responded, they found no footprints, no fingerprints, no witnesses, no evidence of forced entry. By autumn 1982, the case had been reassigned to Detective Arnie Hamilton, who specialized in harassment cases. Under his direction, the police installed a specialized recording device on her phone. Set up motion-activated cameras at entry points. Organized drive-by patrols every half hour during night shifts. Analyzed handwriting on the threatening notes. Interviewed neighbors, co-workers, and former patients. Checked Roy Makepeace alibis for each incident. The investigation was consuming extraordinary resources with 0 leads. "In every harassment case I'd worked, we'd have something by this point," Hamilton noted in his case files. "A fingerprint. A witness. A pattern that pointed somewhere. Here, we had nothing but the victim's testimony." Meanwhile, the harassment took a darker turn. November 8, 1982, Cindy reported finding a dead cat on her porch, its throat cut. December 2, a small fire started outside her kitchen window. December 11, Cindy called police at 3:14 a.m., claiming someone was trying to break in. Officers arrived within 4 minutes to find her hysterical but no signs of attempted entry. January 2, 1983 marked a critical escalation. Cindy's friend Agnes Woodcock came for a scheduled lunch to find her front door ajar. "Cindy!" Agnes called, stepping cautiously inside. No answer. Agnes found Cindy in the basement, unconscious. A nylon stocking knotted around her neck. A note pinned to her hand with a paring knife. It read simply, "You are dead." At the hospital, after regaining consciousness, Cindy described being grabbed from behind as she checked her mailbox. She remembered nothing else until waking up with Agnes beside her. Medical examination revealed bruising consistent with strangulation, but the knife wound on her hand was superficial, almost surgical in its precision. Detective Hamilton interviewed her for 4 hours. His notes reflect growing suspicion. Victim claims attacker wore gloves and mask. Convenient explanation for lack of DNA evidence. Knife used was from her own kitchen. Yet he also wrote, "Fear appears genuine. Either she is experiencing these attacks or genuinely believes she is." Cindy's family split in their reactions. Her mother Tilly began staying with her several nights a week. Her father Otto questioned why the attacker never struck when anyone was present. And Roy Makepeace, when interviewed again, offered a clinical assessment. Cindy has always had difficulty distinguishing between her internal emotional states and external reality. During our marriage, she would sometimes attribute her own feelings to actions I allegedly took. The case now commanded unprecedented resources. The RCMP conducted round-the-clock surveillance for 2 weeks, which Cindy was aware of. They installed panic buttons throughout her house connected directly to the police station. They analyzed voice recordings of every male in Cindy's life against the anonymous calls. They assigned a female officer to stay with Cindy overnight on multiple occasions. They created a dedicated task force to track leads. Yet patterns emerged that troubled investigators. The attacker struck only when Cindy was between visits from protective officers. Despite phone tracing equipment, calls were never on the line long enough to trace. No surveillance camera ever captured an intruder. Cindy began to sense when attacks would come, canceling appointments. A handwriting analysis on threatening notes was inconclusive but showed similarities to Cindy's own writing. In June 1983, after another attack where Cindy was found bound in her car with a plastic bag over her head, yet somehow able to honk the horn to attract attention, the investigation took a controversial turn. Detective Hamilton requested a psychological assessment. The police department itself became fractured over the case. One camp, led by Hamilton, suspected Munchausen syndrome, a psychological disorder where someone fabricates threats or injuries for attention. They pointed to the convenient timing of attacks and lack of evidence. "It's not that she's lying," Hamilton explained to his supervisor. "She may genuinely believe these attacks are happening, even if she's causing them herself." The other camp, including Officer McBride, believed Cindy was being terrorized by someone sophisticated enough to evade detection. "No one could fake that level of terror," McBride insisted. "The woman is living in hell, and we're starting to question her instead of protecting her." Cindy's family and friends were similarly divided. Her mother Tilly and friend Agnes never doubted her. "I found her unconscious, bleeding," Agnes argued. "You can't fake that." Her father and sister became increasingly skeptical. "If someone wanted to kill her, they've had hundreds of opportunities," Melanie pointed out. "Instead, they just terrorize her enough to get attention, but never when anyone's watching." Only Roy maintained a carefully neutral position. "Whether these attacks are occurring externally or internally doesn't change the fact that Cindy is suffering," he told police. "She needs help either way." By 1985, Cindy's life had completely unraveled. She had quit her nursing job. Moved to a new house. The harassment followed. Changed her name again. I hired private investigator Ozzy Caban to supplement police protection. Begun therapy with psychiatrist Dr. Alan Marcus. Started carrying a knife for protection. The attacks continued, now including being drugged and waking up in a ditch 6 miles from home. Finding photos of herself sleeping left on her pillow. Having her phone lines cut repeatedly. Being beaten unconscious in her garage. Each incident was meticulously documented. Each investigation led nowhere. The case had consumed over 1,000 police hours. Cindy had filed 103 official reports of harassment, vandalism, breaks-ins, assaults, and death threats. Something had to give. November 1985. After nearly 4 years of fruitless investigation, Detective Hamilton made a controversial decision. Without Cindy's knowledge, he obtained authorization for covert surveillance. For 2 weeks, plainclothes officers followed Cindy. Hidden cameras monitored her movements. On November 22, a surveillance team tracked her to a hardware store in an adjacent town where she would have no reason to shop. The footage shows Cindy making a purchase, looking nervously over her shoulder, paying cash. The item she bought, a very specific type of twine. The same unusual twine that would be found binding her wrists after she reported her next attack, just 3 days later. When confronted with this evidence, Cindy had no explanation. The investigation was about to take a dramatic turn that would forever change how everyone viewed the case of Cindy James. December 1985. A sterile interview room at the Richmond RCMP headquarters. Detective Arnie Hamilton slides a photograph across the table to Cindy James. The grainy surveillance image shows her at a hardware store checkout, purchasing twine. This was taken 3 days before you reported being tied up with this exact same material, Hamilton says, his voice measured but firm. Can you explain that? Cindy stares at the photo. Her hands tremble as she pushes it away. Someone must have followed me there, she whispers. They knew what I was buying. They're always watching me. Hamilton's partner, Detective Sarah Brenner, leans forward. Cindy, we've monitored every person who's come within 100 yards of you for 2 weeks. There was no one following you. Then they followed you following me, Cindy insists, her voice rising. They're always one step ahead. The detectives exchange glances. 7 hours of questioning yields nothing but circular explanations. In his case notes that evening, Hamilton writes, "Subject remains committed to her narrative despite confrontation with contradictory evidence. Either she truly believes what she's saying, or she's the most convincing person I've encountered in 17 years of police work." January 1986. Dr. Alan Marcus, the psychiatrist who had been treating Cindy for anxiety related to her harassment, receives an unprecedented request from the RCMP, a full psychological evaluation of his patient focused on her capacity for self-harm. I was put in an impossible position, Dr. Marcus would later testify. As her treating physician, I had a duty of care. But I also had a professional obligation to consider the mounting evidence. Over 6 intensive sessions, Dr. Marcus administered a battery of tests including the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, MMPI, Rorschach inkblot tests, and structured clinical interviews. His findings shocked Cindy's supporters. Subject displays pronounced histrionic personality traits with possible dissociative episodes. There are indications of childhood emotional neglect creating a deep-seated need for attention and care that was never fulfilled in her formative years or adult relationships. Most significantly, Dr. Marcus noted, patient shows capability of compartmentalizing traumatic or emotionally challenging experiences, potentially allowing her to perform actions in one psychological state that she may have no conscious memory of in another. In layman's terms, Cindy could theoretically be attacking herself without remembering doing so. When Dr. Marcus gently attempted to explore this possibility with Cindy, she abruptly terminated treatment and accused him of conspiring with her attacker. February 1986. The Richmond RCMP officially reclassifies Cindy's case from harassment investigation to potential mental health situation. Resources are quietly redirected, though public statements remain supportive. The evidence that troubled investigators continued to mount. An analysis of 73 threatening phone calls showed not one lasted longer than 12 seconds, precisely the minimum time needed to trace a call, suggesting the caller knew police procedures. A handwriting analysis of threatening notes showed striking similarities to Cindy's handwriting when she was asked to use her non-dominant hand. Despite claiming constant surveillance by her stalker, Cindy could shop, visit friends, and go to appointments without incident when accompanied by others. In multiple incidents where she reported being dragged outside, no footprints were found in the snow or mud besides her own. The nylon stockings used in strangulation attempts matched a brand found in her dresser. Agnes Woodcock, still Cindy's staunchest defender, began to face difficult questions from her own husband. Tom kept asking how someone could terrorize Cindy for years without leaving a single piece of evidence, Agnes recalled. I had no answers, just my gut feeling that her fear was real. Cindy's mother Tilly remained unwavering in her support, moving in with her daughter for months at a time. My child is not making this up, she told reporters. Someone wants to destroy her, and the police have given up. But perhaps most damaging to Cindy's credibility was the assessment from her ex-husband. In a confidential police interview, Roy Makepeace stated, "During our marriage, Cindy would occasionally fabricate minor health issues when she felt I was distant. Nothing of this magnitude, but the pattern of seeking attention through sympathy was established." March 1986. Frustrated with police skepticism, Cindy's parents hire private investigator Ozzie Caban, a former RCMP officer with 25 years of experience. I took the case fully expecting to prove the police wrong, Caban admitted years later. I'd seen the system fail victims before, especially women. I was certain this was another example. Caban applied old-school detective methods. Installing independent surveillance equipment in Cindy's home. Analyzing phone records to identify patterns. Interviewing neighbors who had never been questioned. Setting up nighttime stakeouts without police knowledge. Checking Cindy's vehicle for tracking devices. He also took measures the police couldn't legally justify. Following Roy Makepeace for 2 weeks. Investigating other doctors at Richmond General for potential grudges. Reviewing Cindy's nursing files for patient complications. Creating a complete timeline of every reported incident plotted against Cindy's known whereabouts. After 3 months of investigation, Caban requested a private meeting with Cindy's parents. I've never had a harder conversation in my professional life, Caban recalled. Telling parents that their daughter was likely responsible for her own terror, I felt like I was betraying everyone. His evidence was compelling. During 112 hours of independent surveillance, no suspicious activity occurred. When Cindy believed she was unmonitored, but Caban was secretly watching, no incidents occurred. Several reported phone threats coincided exactly with times Cindy was home alone with access to an unmonitored second phone line. The timing of attacks corresponded with periods when police protection had just been reduced. Most significantly, Caban had caught Cindy in a lie about her whereabouts on a day when her tires were slashed. Otto Hack left the meeting convinced. Tilly, Cindy's mother, refused to believe it. May 23, 1986. A pivotal moment that would perplex investigators for decades. Agnes Woodcock and her husband Tom invited Cindy for dinner, hoping to provide a night of normalcy. After the meal, Cindy went to her car to retrieve a sweater she'd forgotten. When she didn't return after several minutes, Agnes went to check on her. What Agnes found would test even her unwavering faith in her friend's story. Cindy was outside on the ground behind her car. A nylon stocking was tied around her neck. She was semi-conscious, moaning softly. "Someone attacked me," she whispered when Agnes revived her. The police response was massive, multiple units, forensic team, even a helicopter with a thermal camera searching for someone fleeing the scene. They found nothing. No footprints in the soft earth around the car. No fibers beside Cindy's own on the stocking. No defensive wounds on her hands. Most troubling, Agnes and Tom's dinner with Cindy had been arranged spontaneously that afternoon. No one else knew she would be at their home that evening. The attack happened in the approximately 3 minutes she was alone. "That was when I started having real doubts," Agnes admitted later. "I didn't want to, but how could someone have known she'd be at our house? How could they attack her in that tiny window of time?" Tom was more direct. "Either she did this to herself, or we're dealing with a psychic stalker with invisible feet. I know which one seems more likely." For the first time, Agnes didn't argue with him. June 1986. After the incident at Agnes's house, Cindy was hospitalized for observation. The medical examination revealed peculiarities that would add another layer to the already complex case. Dr. Jennifer White, the emergency physician who examined Cindy, noted in her report, "Patient presents with ligature marks consistent with strangulation, but the pattern is unusual. In typical strangulation attacks, marks are uneven, with deeper bruising where maximum force was applied. Here, the marks are uniformly shallow, more consistent with consistent pressure applied without the variable force typical in struggle situations." More tellingly, blood tests revealed the presence of benzodiazepines, powerful sedatives, in Cindy's system. She had no prescription for these medications. When questioned, Cindy suggested her attacker must have drugged her. But the timeline made this virtually impossible. She had been in Agnes and Tom's sight until moments before the attack, with no opportunity for someone to administer medication. Dr. White requested a psychiatric consultation. The attending psychiatrist, Dr. Herbert Maitland, spent 3 hours with Cindy. His assessment: patient demonstrates signs of factitious disorder with physical symptoms, possibly complicated by dissociative elements. In his confidential report to police, Dr. Maitland wrote, "Ms. James may be experiencing what's colloquially called multiple personality phenomenon, where traumatic experiences cause the mind to compartmentalize. In layman's terms, one part of her may be causing these injuries without the conscious awareness of her primary personality." But he also added a crucial caveat: "However, I cannot rule out the possibility, however remote, that she is indeed being victimized. The fear she displays appears genuine regardless of its source." July 1986. With the case at an impasse, Detective Hamilton proposes a polygraph examination. Cindy initially agrees, then cancels 3 separate appointments at the last minute, citing illness, anxiety, and finally, on advice from her new lawyer. The police interpret this as consciousness of guilt. Cindy's supporters see it as the reasonable response of a traumatized woman being treated as a suspect rather than a victim. The truth may lie in a session recorded by Dr. Maitland during Cindy's hospital stay. "Dr. Maitland, would you be willing to take a polygraph test to help prove what you're experiencing is real?" Cindy: "Of course. I have nothing to hide." Dr. Maitland: "What if the test suggested you were being untruthful?" Cindy: long pause, "That's impossible. Unless he's somehow gotten to the machine. He can do things like that. He has connections everywhere." Dr. Maitland: "Who has these connections, Cindy?" Cindy, voice changes slightly, becomes firmer, "You know who. The same one who's been watching me for years. The same one none of you can catch because you're not really trying." This exchange troubled Dr. Maitland enough to note in his records, "Patient demonstrates paranoid ideation with possible delusional framework to maintain internal narrative consistency when presented with contradictory evidence." August 1986. While Cindy was briefly hospitalized following another reported attack, her father Otto made a discovery while collecting clothes from her home. Hidden in a locked compartment of her bedside table were 7 journals spanning the past 4 years. Otto, believing they might contain clues to her attacker's identity, broke the lock. What he found instead would upend everyone's understanding of the case. The journals contained daily entries in what appeared to be different handwriting styles. Some entries were signed Cindy. Others had different names: Catherine, Claire, and most frequently, Miranda. The entries from Miranda were particularly disturbing. One read, "She doesn't deserve peace. She let them hurt us for years and never fought back. Never told. Just smiled and pretended everything was perfect. Someone needs to make her pay for her weakness." Another entry, dated just before a reported attack. "She's getting too much attention from the wrong people. The police are asking too many questions. I'll have to remind her what happens when she lets people get too close." Otto brought the journals directly to Detective Hamilton, who had them analyzed by forensic psychologists. Their conclusion: the journals showed strong indicators of dissociative identity disorder, then called multiple personality disorder, with at least one alternate personality, Miranda, who appeared hostile toward the primary personality, Cindy. When confronted with the journals after her release from the hospital, Cindy became hysterical. "Those aren't mine," she screamed. "He broke into my house and planted them. He's trying to make me look crazy." But handwriting analysis confirmed all entries were written by the same hand, despite stylistic differences. The paper matched notebooks purchased by Cindy. The ink matched pens found in her home. Perhaps most convincingly, entries in the Cindy portions described events only she could have known: private conversations with Agnes, thoughts about her therapy sessions, reflections on her marriage to Roy. September 1986. Armed with the journal evidence, Otto and Melanie Hack make the painful decision to distance themselves from Cindy. They issue a public statement. "We have supported our daughter's sister unconditionally for years, but we can no longer ignore the evidence that Cindy needs psychiatric help, not police protection. We implore the medical system to recognize the severity of her condition and provide appropriate treatment." Tilly, Cindy's mother, responds with her own statement. "My daughter is being stalked and terrorized while the system fails her. Now her own family has abandoned her too. I will stand by Cindy until this monster is caught, no matter how long it takes." The family never speaks as a unit again. Agnes Woodcock, after reading excerpts from the journals provided by police, makes the heartbreaking decision to step back as well. "I love Cindy," she told reporters, "but I can't help her the way she needs. This is beyond what friendship can fix." With her support system crumbling, Cindy becomes increasingly isolated. She fires her psychiatrist, accusing him of colluding with police. She changes her phone number again. She installs additional locks on her doors. And the reports of harassment continue. October 1986 to May 1989. The case enters a strange limbo. Police maintain a file but investigate incidents perfunctorily. Mental health professionals attempt to engage with Cindy, but she refuses consistent treatment. During these years, the pattern of reported attacks continues but evolves. The incidents become less frequent but more severe. Cindy begins reporting being taken to unknown locations while unconscious. She claims her attacker is injecting her with unknown substances. She reports entire days missing from her memory. The threatening notes shift from generic threats to personal details that only her attacker could know. In February 1988, after Cindy reports being drugged and abandoned in a ditch nearly 30 miles from her home, a toxicology screen reveals a concerning development: traces of morphine and Demerol in her system. Both are prescription opioids with sedative properties, neither of which had been prescribed to her. Detective Hamilton notes in the case file, "Source of narcotics unknown. Subject has no known access to these substances through legal channels. First physical evidence that cannot be easily self-inflicted without external resources." For the first time in years, the investigation regains momentum. Police investigate whether Cindy maintained connections to the hospital pharmaceutical supply. If Roy Makepeace, as a physician, could be involved. Whether she had developed relationships with drug dealers. If any of her current or former psychiatric medications could create false positives. All leads reach dead ends. The presence of prescription narcotics in her system remains unexplained. May 25, 1989. After a period of relative calm, Cindy phones her mother Tilly. "I think it's finally over," she says. "I haven't had any incidents in weeks. Maybe he's given up." According to Tilly, Cindy sounds more relaxed than she has in years. They make plans for dinner that weekend. Cindy mentions wanting to possibly move away, start fresh somewhere her story isn't known. May 26, 1989. Cindy fails to show up for a therapy appointment, one of the few connections to mental health care she's maintained. The receptionist calls her home. No answer. May 27, 1989. Tilly, unable to reach her daughter for 2 days, calls police to request a welfare check. Officers find Cindy's home empty, her purse and keys missing. Her car is not in the garage. May 28, 1989. A search is initiated. Hospitals are checked. Friends and remaining family members are contacted. No one has seen Cindy. May 31, 1989. 2 weeks after their hopeful phone call, Tilly receives the news that will haunt her for the rest of her life. A body has been found behind an abandoned house at 7736 Hudson Street in Vancouver, miles from Cindy's home. The victim is identified as Cindy James. Her hands and feet are bound behind her back with twine. A black nylon stocking is wrapped 6 times around her neck. Her body shows multiple needle marks. No identification is found on or near the body. Cause of death, overdose of morphine and Demerol, compounded by strangulation. The forensic investigation of Cindy's death scene presents investigators with a puzzle that seems to defy solution. Detective Hamilton, called back to lead the death investigation, documents the contradictions. 1. Cindy's hands were bound behind her back, yet the bindings left no marks, abrasions, or bruises on her wrists. 2. Despite the rural location, her feet were clean, suggesting she hadn't walked to the scene. 3. No drag marks were present, indicating she hadn't been carried. 4. Her car was found half a mile away with no evidence of struggle inside. 5. The lethal dose of narcotics would have incapacitated her within minutes, making it virtually impossible for her to bind herself after injection. 6. Yet the position and tension of the bindings made it equally implausible that someone else had tied her unconscious body. The toxicology report revealed enough morphine and Demerol in her system to kill an adult 3 times over. The narcotics were administered via injection, with multiple needle marks suggesting several attempts to find a vein. The physical evidence presents us with a seemingly impossible scenario, Hamilton wrote in his final report. The subject could not have administered the drugs and then bound herself in this manner. Yet equally, it seems implausible that someone else bound her without leaving any defensive wounds or signs of struggle. The forensic pathologist, Dr. Marcus Bennett, put it more bluntly in his private notes: either this woman managed to do something medically impossible, or we're missing a critical piece of this puzzle. January 1990. After an exhaustive 7-month investigation, Coroner Alan McMorran delivers his official finding in the death of Cindy James. The hearing room is divided, police and most of the Hack family on one side, Tilly and a small group of supporters on the other. McMorran reviews the evidence methodically. The lack of defensive wounds. The impossibility of self-administration followed by complex binding. The absence of evidence suggesting another person at the scene. The history of reported harassment with no independent verification. The psychiatric assessments suggesting dissociative states. The journals indicating multiple personalities. After 3 hours of clinical detail, McMorran delivers his verdict. The death of Cynthia Dawn James cannot be classified as either homicide or suicide. The physical evidence presents contradictions that cannot be definitively resolved. Therefore, this court renders a finding of death by unknown causes. For the police, this ambiguous ruling is frustrating but not surprising. For Tilly Hack, it's a devastating denial of justice. For everyone touched by the case, it ensures that the mysterious 7-year ordeal of Cindy James will never have a satisfying conclusion. As the courtroom clears, Detective Hamilton approaches Dr. Herbert Maitland, the psychiatrist who had briefly treated Cindy. Off the record, Hamilton asks, "What do you really think happened?" Maitland considers the question carefully before responding. "I've always thought we were looking at this as an either-or proposition," he says. Either Cindy was being stalked, or she was harming herself. What if it was both? Hamilton looks confused. Both? How? Cindy clearly had dissociative episodes, parts of her personality that operated independently, Maitland explains. What if someone realized this and exploited it? Someone who understood her psychology intimately and knew exactly how to manipulate her dissociative states. You're suggesting someone was gaslighting her into harming herself? Hamilton asks incredulously. More than that, Maitland replies. I'm suggesting someone could have cultivated and communicated with her alternate personalities. Someone with psychiatric training who knew exactly which buttons to push. Someone who could plant suggestions that her alternate personalities would carry out, making it appear that she was fabricating attacks while simultaneously making her genuinely believe she was being stalked. Hamilton's expression darkens. You're talking about Roy. Maitland says nothing, just holds Hamilton's gaze. We investigated him thoroughly, Hamilton insists. He had alibis for most of the incidents. He wouldn't need to be physically present, Maitland counters. Just in her mind. As they part ways, Hamilton can't shake the psychiatrist's theory. That night, he pulls Roy Makepeace's file and begins reading it with fresh eyes. Two crucial details jump out at him. 1. Roy's specialty at medical school before switching to general psychiatry, dissociative disorders. 2. A notation from an interview with one of Roy's colleagues. Makepeace often discussed theoretical interest in cases where patients developed multiple personalities as response to trauma. Hamilton reaches for his phone to reopen the investigation, then slowly puts it down. Without concrete evidence, the case would remain what the coroner had declared it, an unknown. Some mysteries, Hamilton realizes, are destined to remain unsolved. The mysterious death of Cindy James remains one of Canada's most perplexing unsolved cases. Was she the victim of a calculated stalker who managed to evade police for years? Did she orchestrate an elaborate hoax that tragically spiraled out of control? Or is the truth something else entirely, something that remains hidden in the shadows to this day? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think really happened to Cindy James? Do you believe she was murdered, or that her death was self-inflicted? And tell me, what other unsolved mysteries have captivated your imagination? What cases would you like to see covered next on Crime Scene Chronicles? If you found this story as haunting as I did, please hit that like button and share this video with others who appreciate diving deep into mysterious cases that challenge our understanding of crime and human behavior. Don't forget to subscribe to Crime Scene Chronicles and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode as we continue to explore the darkest corners of true crime history, searching for the truth that others may have missed. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most disturbing mysteries aren't found in fiction, they're hiding in plain sight, waiting to be uncovered.